home. At last. What a day I've had. Boggart's Hole Clough. Did you ever hear of such a place? Elizabeth came to me in the week and she said, "We're going to Boggart's Hole Clough. I've been asked to speak." "Oh, right," I said. "Where's Boggart's Hole Clough?" "Lately in Manchester," she said. I thought, at least it's not London. "We'll make a day of it." "OK," I said. We left on the early train, and when we got there, I found that Boggart's Hole Clough might be an ugly name, but the park was beautiful. There was a platform set about 100 yards ahead of us, and there were 15,000 plus women there, all excited, all happy to see Elizabeth and all waiting eagerly to hear what she had to say. I went ahead. I walked ahead of her, and when we'd gone about 50 yards towards the stage, we were set upon by a group of angry men. One of them tried to grab my bodice. I batted him off, and then he came back at me. He had his face half an inch away from mine and he was screaming. I can't tell you what he said, I have no idea. All I could see was the contorted, ugly face and the angry eyes. He was spitting on me as he shouted. I could smell his body odour and the alcohol on his breath. He started to wave his arms around, and that's when I lost it. That's when I was right back there. Right back. The years just fell away. I was terrified. I was so frightened. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest and I could hear the rush of blood in my ears. And then all of a sudden, just as I thought he was going to strike me, he fell away. And Elizabeth walked between us. less than 5 foot in height, cool as a cucumber, not 1 ounce of fear. She walked through those men like a warm knife through butter. The crowd just fell away before her, like the Red Sea before Moses, and she climbed the steps and stood there on the platform, ready to speak. I was a bit of a wreck, to be honest. My legs were like jelly, but one of the Manchester sisters came. She took me to one side, we found a bench, she gave me a hug and a snifter of brandy from her hip flask. That's the sisterhood for you. The rest of the afternoon was glorious. Elizabeth was fantastic. Everybody applauded her and listened carefully and gave her the respect that was her due. I was on the way back on the train. All that emotion, all that fear, all those memories turned to anger. I said, "Elizabeth, we have to stop doing this. We could have got injured today. We could have been killed. Those men were seriously bad. You're 73 years old, Elizabeth. Don't you think it's time that you handed on the baton to one of the younger women or a group of the younger women? But you need to stop. You need to give up." She looked at me and she gave me what I've come to call the Lizzy look. She fixes you with her eyes, doesn't blink, raises her eyelids slightly, tilts her head to one side and says nothing, absolutely nothing. Because Elizabeth knows that I know that giving up, handing on the baton, taking a rest are not words in Elizabeth's vocabulary. These corsets are killing me. I'm dying to get them off. Instruments of torture, Suzanna, invented by a man to keep you in your place. If you're in agony all the time and you can't take a deep breath, you're not going to be fighting for your rights now, are you, dear? Good old Elizabeth. She's always right. But then, she's only 6 stone in weight. You can't tell whether she's wearing corsets or she isn't. Unlike me, the Congleton cart horse, they're coming off. go back a long way, Elizabeth and I. 1869 is when we met. She'd been in Congleton since 1867, when she opened a girls' school in Moody Street. But it was her unconventional relationship with one Mr. Ben Elmy that was causing the fuss. But I wasn't bothered about that. I was interested in what she was teaching those girls in Moody Hall. She was teaching them all about their bodies, how their bodies worked, how babies were made, how babies were born, and even how you stopped babies being made. I was 19 years old at the time, and I'd already been married for 3 years. I was the mother of a 2-year-old daughter. I'd had 5 miscarriages, and no one had ever told me how my body worked, where babies come from, and certainly not how to stop them being made. My father had decided I would marry John when I was 15. I met him a couple of times, but I'd been raised on fairy stories, Cinderella, the wonderful wedding, the white dress, the flowers, the happy ever after. I didn't have a choice anyway. My father paid a large dowry, and 2 weeks after my 16th birthday, I walked up the aisle with John, the happiest day of my life, which turned into the worst night of my life. It might have been okay if he'd have been kind, gentle. But John was a brute. When I tried to say no, he thumped me. So I quickly learned that you don't say no. 10 months, almost to the day, my daughter was born. Nobody told me about childbirth. Nobody told me about the pain or the horror. It went on for 7 days before she was born. I didn't know that babies were supposed to come out head first. She came out feet first. I was lucky to be alive, and she was, but she thrived, thankfully. I felt very ill for a long time afterwards. I had my first miscarriage and she was 3 months old. My second when she was 6 months old, and so on and so forth, until I was at number 5. And that's when I met Elizabeth. I went along to a lecture that she was giving, and it was a Damascene moment. There was a woman talking about women having rights, women being human beings, women having control over their own bodies. I loved her at first sight. A few days later, she invited me to tea, and I went along to Moody Hall, and we were chatting, and she was asking me about my life, and she was so free and so open. I found myself telling her all about my horrible wedding night, about Jennifer's birth, about the endless miscarriages. She said, "Susanna, you need to see a doctor. There's obviously been some damage done with Jennifer's birth. I know a really good man in Liverpool in Rodney Street. I'll make you an appointment and we'll go together." "Elizabeth," I said, "I have no money." She said, "Then you must ask John. You must go to him and tell him that you need to be seen by a physician." I did try. He went absolutely crazy, blacked my eye, said there was no way any man was looking at me, and if I went anywhere near Elmy's Hall again, he would black the other eye. That was John. Not empty threats. Elizabeth came round the morning after to see how I'd gone on. but I couldn't open the door because she would have seen my face, which was really badly bruised. And of course, he'd cracked my ribs for good measure, so I hid until she'd gone. The day after, the bruising was really coming out, and Elizabeth called again. I could see her silhouette through the glass in the front door, so I hid under the stairs. She went away, but day 3, I tried to hide in the kitchen. I could see her at the front door, and I thought, she's gone. I sat down, and her face came to the window at the kitchen. She wasn't taking no for an answer. That's Elizabeth. I had to open the door. I let her in, and she said, "My God, Suzanna, what is wrong with your face?" I said, I walked into the larder door. She said, "This larder? This one here?" She walked over and opened it, and she looked at it, and she shut it, and she looked at me. And for the first time ever, I got the Lizzy look. Up went the eyebrows, over went the head, and she said, "Suzanna, I think you'd better tell me the truth." So I did. I told her everything. And she said, "We have to get you away. You cannot stay here with this man. He will kill you." And I had to agree. So we planned it well. She got me a job in one of Ben's mills, and I moved out, lock, stock and barrel. At first I moved into Moody Hall, into the annex. But that night, John arrived and he took Jennifer. He took her because he owned her. There was nothing I could do. There was nothing that even Elizabeth could do. He took her, and I never saw my little girl again. Years later, some relatives told me that he'd told Jennifer that her mother had died. When she was 15, she got engaged to a 52-year-old clergyman. I was incensed. I was beside myself. I wrote to John. I begged him, please let Jennifer have an education. Let her make her own choices. It just made him more determined. And repeating the past, 2 weeks after her 16th birthday, she married. 10 months later, she was dead. She died in childbirth. She's buried over there in Congleton Cemetery with my grandchild in her arms. If only I'd been a little younger, I would have benefited from the great work that Elizabeth and Ben did. 1882, the Married Women's Property Act. I could have kept my dowry. It would have been my money. 1886, the Guardianship of Infants Act. I could have kept Jennifer. We've got such a lot to thank Elizabeth for. Modern women don't realise what she's done for them. But I say, thank you, Elizabeth. When we parted earlier today at the station, she gave me the Lizzy look and said nothing. She knew that I knew that first thing tomorrow morning I'll be round at Buxton House helping her in her campaigns, and I'll be there at Boggart's Whole Clough or whatever it's called the next time. I'll be there right beside her, even though I'm terrified of angry men. Thank you, Elizabeth.